Hello everybody, my name is Matt, and long time no see. I've just been hanging out, playing some Final Fantasy XIV, and replaying some old favorites like Persona 4, Command & Conquer 3, and, relevant to this video, Resident Evil 1, and the HD remake of Resident Evil 2. So today we're going to take a look, at the trailer for Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. This is the movie that's coming out apparently in theaters. I had thought it was coming out on Netflix, but it's coming out only in theaters, so I guess I'll have to go to the theaters on November 24th. If I could pull myself away from Endwalker, because I'll still be in the hype of that, because that comes out like 4 days before that, I'll have to go see it. So, just before we get to the trailer, I have to say, Resident Evil, I was working it out in my head. I was thinking the other day when I was talking to my friend Howie, I was like, what is my favorite video game franchise of all time? And I've gone back and forth between, like, Final Fantasy and, like, Warcraft and stuff like Pokemon. And in many of those cases, especially Warcraft and Pokemon, recently, the companies and the games, either the companies have been terrible, like Blizzard, and the games have been bad, like World of Warcraft, or the games have just been super disappointing to me, like the Pokemon games. And Final Fantasy, I do really, really love still, but as a whole franchise of games, I think there are a couple weak ones that prevent it from being my favorite, which is my long-winded way of saying I came to the realization that Resident Evil is probably my favorite video game franchise of all time. I grew up playing it. I had Resident Evil 2 on my N64. I had Resident Evil 3 on my on my GameCube. And then I had Dreamcast and I had Code Veronica. And then after that, I finally got a PS2 and went and replayed Resident Evil 1. Although they remade it for the GameCube, so I got that too as well. And then everything since then, I love 4. 5 is okay, and 6 is a huge mess that we don't talk about, but then everything after that, 7 and 8 is good. The Revelation games are great. And while not everything is amazing in the franchise, overall, I think it's my favorite. So I'm going into this as a super fan of Resident Evil. However, I will not ignore the history of the Resident Evil movie franchise with, which has been, I have been describing it both in videos like this and my videos about Warcraft and on Twitter. I've been describing it as something I view as so bad it's entertaining. Like, the Resident Evil movies are not good in the slightest, but they were so terrible that they were entertaining. I don't expect this to be that, but I also don't expect this to be great. Like, my biggest wish would be is if this Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City movie was like the quality of level of the Warcraft movie, where the Warcraft movie wasn't amazing, but it was passable. I would give it like a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. And I would love for this to be that, because unlike Warcraft, I think if they could just get to that level, I think Resident Evil is so prolific of a franchise that it would warrant more movies. And also because Resident Evil, is about zombies. Zombies are still a big hit for some reason, even though The Walking Dead sucks now, but whatever. Controversial opinion. But yeah, so I'm hoping this is going to be exciting and at least decent. I'm doubtful because I don't know how they're going to cram 2 games worth of stories into one 2-hour movie, if it's even that long. And I'm worried that stuff is going to be cut out. So without delaying any further, here we go. We're going to take a look at the Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City official trailer in 3, 2, 1, now.
Come on.
I hate the stingers that they do like that.
Every story has a beginning.
Okay, look straight out from the beginning of Resident Evil 2.
The origin of evil.
Why are you back here, Claire? Your conspiracies weren't true when we were kids. They're not true now.
That's Chris.
We need to expose Umbrella. Watch this.
I'm afraid, Claire. I'm afraid of what they're gonna do to this town. You see, Umbrella, they had an incident.
That's Birkin, I believe.
Chernobyl, if you know what I mean. People are getting sick.
Okay, straight out from the beginning of RE2. CGI didn't look too great on the truck, but okay. I think that's supposed to be Chief Irons with the dog.
We have to contain this.
Shall we go?
So are both of these taking place at the same time? The stories?
What were Umbrella doing here?
This is where they're experimenting on him.
We should split up.
I think that was Richard Aiken. There's Jill, finally. There she is again, looking like she has no idea what she's doing. I think Jill is horribly miscast, by the way. Whoa! Oh, that's recreated straight from the first game. Itchy Tasty?
We gotta get out of here.
We're gonna take Umbrella down.
What the fuck was that? Was that Nemesis or Tyrant? The liquor moment looks almost completely faithfully recreated. Huh. Alright, so... That was a mixed trailer for me. Let's see if I can not forget anything. I'll start with the good stuff first. There's a bunch of recreated scenes that are like straight out of the first two games. Walking up to the mansion, the first time you encounter a zombie eating somebody in the very first game was like recreated like beat for beat, it looked like. The scene with the liquor jumping down from the ceiling looked like it was definitely just completely recreated. The dog with who I assume was Chief Irons in the parking lot was recreated, although in the original scene it's supposed to be Leon that's there. I also just come to realize that we didn't see Ada Wong at all. We didn't see Sherry Birkin at all. Are they in this movie? Rebecca Chambers is also absent. And this was my fear. I have to look up the IMDb real quick while I talk. This was my fear of them doing both games in one movie, as they're cutting out characters that were pretty integral to the story of both games. Like Rebecca Chambers, hold on, Resident Evil, welcome to Raccoon City. Rebecca Chambers becomes basically like the second biggest character in Chris's side of his story. Like, he sees her multiple times. And is she even, let's see. So we got Claire, Chris, Jill, William Birkin was who I thought it was, yeah. Wesker, I don't even remember seeing him for like more than a couple seconds. Yeah, that was Chief Irons in the parking lot. Okay, so there is a woman cast as Ada, Lily Gao. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, Brad Vickers, I called that right. Okay, Annette is in the movie, Annette Birkin. Richard Aiken, I also called that. Okay. So there is a girl cast as Sherry, but on IMDb, she's literally the last cast member. She's like behind multiple zombies, like actors, which is weird. Rebecca's not in this movie. That's stupid. Well, let me just look on the extended cast list. Oh, Enrico is apparently in this movie. Interesting. Lisa Trevor, yeah, we knew that already. Yeah, Rebecca Chambers is not in this movie, which is disappointing. So I'm like, this was the first trailer and the movie's coming out in like a month and a half. So it's concerning that we haven't had more information about this. I wonder if there's going to be a second trailer. If Ada Wong is like absent from, like, Ada Wong is a major character of the second game. Like, she's not just like a cameo. Like, Ada Wong left such an impact on the second game that she became, like, besides the main cast of Chris, Jill, Leon, and Claire, I would argue Barry and Ada Wong... Wait, is Barry... I just realized Barry's not in this movie, is he? Hold on. Where's Barry Burton? Barry Burton is basically Rebecca Chambers for Jill's story. Why would they omit Rebecca and Barry? Again, I would say because, again, my point was going to be, outside of the first main cast, Ada Wong left such an impression on the franchise that, besides the main four, I would argue another main character of the Resident Evil franchise is Ada Wong, and slightly lesser, but still very important, Barry Burton. And the fact that Rebecca and Barry are not in the movie, and Ada seems to have like no role. Sherry also has got like the least billing of all the cast members. And Sherry is the second most important character in Claire's campaign. It's Claire then Sherry. Just like with Leon, it's Leon and Ada. So this was my fear of them. Okay, It's frustrating because I'm talking almost always all about story stuff, but like cinematography wise, I have seen people say like, oh, I saw this from when they first showed off pictures. People like, oh, this looks like a cosplay, or oh, this looks like a low rent TV movie. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think the liquor CGI looks great. I think that was supposed to be the tyrant that they showed for like a split second that looked good. The only CGI I thought that looked was the truck falling over. But maybe they could fix that up. Like cinematography wise, I think there was a lot of really good shots. There were a lot of recreations from the games. So I'm very conflicted on like, I think this looked okay for what it was. My biggest problem is like the story. And you can laugh about complaining about a Resident Evil story all you want, but that is what made a lot of people fall in love with the franchise, because Resident Evil, not only was it a story about zombies, but it was a story about like an evil, corrupt corporation taking advantage of how corporations in the United States can basically do whatever they want and are kind of like pseudo governments in themselves, to the point that Raccoon City is basically an umbrella town that is who controls basically the police, the stars, which are like the SWAT team members, every aspect, the orphanage. There was a shot of William Birkin standing in what looked like the orphanage when it showed like the little kids that were sick. So like shot wise, it looks good. I think story wise, I'm very concerned. Also, can I just say, I don't know if this is a controversial opinion or not, but Netflix just did like a 4-episode mini movie series, or whatever you want to call it, like a 4-episode thing, an animated thing about Resident Evil, and it starred Leon and Claire. And I was originally very excited because I should have said this at the beginning. Claire is like my favorite character of the franchise. I really, really love Claire. She is absolutely my favorite character. I think in every appearance that she's in, she's phenomenal. And I think it's insulting to Claire to consider Jill the main female character of Resident Evil. As you can tell from this movie, where Jill is in it for like 3 seconds, and you have to like know that that's Jill because you can't recognize her. And I will say, I wish they would swap the hairstyles of Jill and Claire, because Jill has short hair because she's in basically a military organization. So she would have short hair. Claire always has hair in a ponytail. That's her iconic look. Every single game she's in, she has her hair tied back in a ponytail. That's like the core defining feature of what she looks like. But like even in this movie trailer, it looks like Claire is the main character of the movie, which is an odd choice. And I just have to say, going back to the Netflix series, I was originally very excited for it because I love Claire. But then when it came out, they made Claire, like, I feel like they almost ruined her. Like, I still love her a lot, but she was so miswritten, I guess, like written poorly in the 4-episode thing. I don't know what they're even calling it, miniseries, I guess. Because they turned her into like an investigative journalist, and I thought that was so stupid because the games had already established Claire as something else. After the events of Resident Evil 2, she becomes involved with an organization called TerraSave, which is basically like an environmental organization, like environmental activist organization, but instead of for the environment, it's for like bioweapons. So it was an interesting thing between Claire and Chris, because Chris was in STARS, and then Chris basically went on to create an organization to fight militarily against bioweapons, while Claire didn't form TerraSave, but she joined an organization that was against bioweapons from like a civilian standpoint. So it mirrored the fact that they were brother and sister. He was in the military version of basically the same thing that Claire was in. But then they turned her into like an investigative journalist, and she didn't really have a lot to do. And then she gets kidnapped in the mini arc. I mean, whatever. It's spoilers for it, I guess, but it's not great. So I don't really care. It's been out for a while already. If you're going to see it, you're going to see it. She gets kidnapped, and she has to be saved by Leon. And it's like, in the first game, in Resident Evil 2, Leon and Claire seemed like they were equals. Like, they were... Because Leon's nothing special in the first game that he's in, Resident Evil 2. He's a rookie cop. He literally hasn't worked a day in his life. So, he's just as inexperienced as Claire, who has had... She's not militarily trained, but she was trained in, like, guns and knives and stuff by her brother. So, I would say they were basically on the same foot. And then to reduce her in the miniseries to, like, a journalist who has to be saved, and she's not as good as Leon, it's disappointing. And then to see them carry through that storyline of Claire being like a journalist who's looking into Umbrella, it's like, why they didn't, first of all, they don't need that hook for her character in Resident Evil 2. The hook for Claire's character is she's Chris's sister who's proactively looking for her brother. Like, dude, did the scriptwriters think like, oh, she's just obsessed with a male character? It's like, no, she's looking for her only family member because Claire and Chris are orphans. They don't have parents anymore. So that was her main draw. And then after the events of Resident Evil 2, where she has like a human connection with Sherry and she gets close with Leon, then she's still looking for her brother. Like, they keep building on her character. And then she becomes like a very significant character in the franchise. Again, I would argue the most important female character in the franchise. But then to see her be like, oh, she's actually like looking into Umbrella, and the idea she needs to convince Chris that Umbrella is bad is such an odd choice. Obviously, that scene where he's doubting her has to be like literally the beginning of the movie. But the fact that he doubts her at all in the first place is weird, because why would Chris doesn't know, unless they're changing that too. Chris doesn't know that STARS and the Raccoon City Police Department are being corruptly funded by Umbrella and being controlled by Umbrella through the police chief. They don't know that. That's the whole point. When STARS gets sent to the mansion, they're sent as like a sacrifice to clean up, and then after the first cleanup crew goes missing, the second crew comes with Chris and Jill, and basically they're just being thrown to the wolves because they want to cover up what Umbrella did there. So the idea that he wouldn't believe her sister is like, I don't believe that. I don't even particularly like Claire. Like Chris. Like, my favorite characters are Claire and Leon. And that probably stems from the fact that I played Resident Evil 2 first, but also I would argue I don't think Jill is interesting in the slightest, and I think Chris is incredibly overrated going forward after the first game. So I don't know. I'm happy that she is like, that Clara seems to be like the main character of the movie, but the way that they're doing it is doing it in a way that I don't think is necessary to her character, if that makes sense. But like the whole thing of her being like a journalist, I can forgive if they would do like Ada Wong and like Sherry satisfactorily. And the fact that they have no role in the trailers. I actually think Sherry, you see her for like a split second when her father, William Birkin, is like looking at the results of that infected child. I think the girl who's like covering her mouth is supposed to be Sherry, because that reminds me of a scene from the HD remake when she's in the orphanage hiding from the infected version of her dad. It looks just like that. But Sherry's supposed to be like a main character of the second game. Ada Wong drives the plot of the second game. She's the reason things are like Birkin and Annette, like William and Annette are driving the plot, but Ada's also driving the plot as well behind the scenes, which is what you don't find out till like literally the end of the game. And then once you know, you realize, oh, Ada's been like driving the whole plot the whole time behind the scenes, and you just didn't know it. And so to like seemingly give her such a small role, unless they're hiding her. But I'm very confused as if they're going to do the movie, the first game for the first half, and then the second game for the second half, and the middle and the end might overlap a little bit. Because for those who don't know the games, the first game happens, and it's done. The whole game happens. And then the second game happens. I believe it's like a month or so later, maybe? Like, it's because Jill escapes the mansion. She survives, obviously. She's the main character of the first game. And then she goes back and lives in Raccoon City, as we see from the Resident Evil 3 remake. She lives there for, I think it was for a month, before the city falls and the infection breaks out into the city. So, them doing both of them at the same time is a choice that I don't agree with. Again, it seems like, now that I'm thinking about it, it comes down to every single new piece of, like, story that they're adding seems stupid and unnecessary. And I don't know why... with this franchise specifically in the movies, I don't know why they insist on having to rewrite or expand or change things when the base 2 games were so fucking good and popular that it spawned a franchise that has existed for like 25 years still. Just do the fucking first 2 games. First of all, this movie should be the first game, by the way, not both. But do the first game. Do the whole thing, have Chris and Barry and Jill and Rebecca and Wesker. Give them all the time they need, and Richard Aiken gets his moment with the snake. I don't even know if they're going to do the snake in this. Give them the moment they deserve. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of story in the first game, having just replayed it, but when you consider the fact that there's 2 stories going on at the same time, Chris and Jill, it's enough to build out at least an hour and a half movie, if not 2 hours. And then the sequel is Resident Evil 2, which I would argue is even more popular than the first game. And then you just blow the fucking lid off, because then you have Ada, Ada's such a good character, man. And I'm worried that she's gonna be in the movie for like 5 or 10 minutes. That's what my fear is. When she should be like half the movie. That's how important a character she is. So I'm very conflicted. Like, the cinematography and the shots, and I think the costumes look fine. For the most part, I think some of the actor choices are strange. Like, if you didn't know that character was supposed to be Leon, I don't think Avian Jogia, or however you pronounce his name, looks like Leon. And I'm not saying Leon has to be like a white guy, but Avian Jogia, he looks so much like Carlos that I don't know why you wouldn't just wait for the next movie and make him be Carlos and then get someone else to be Leon. Like, it's not because he's like Hispanic. I don't actually know the ethnicity of Avian Jogia. Or, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's Canadian, is all I know. From Victorious. That's the only thing that I know from that actor. It's not because he like looks like he's Hispanic or some flavor of that. It's because he just has like with his hair and everything, his face just looks like Carlos. He's not as buff as Carlos, but that's fine. And then Jill, I'm very surprised because I know that there are a lot of people who really love Jill. I am not a Jill Valentine fan. I think she's fine, but I don't think she deserves to be... I feel like the perception is Jill is the top billing female character of the franchise. Maybe that's not true, but that's how it feels to me. And I don't think she's worthy of it. I think Claire definitely is the biggest female character of this franchise. And I'm very surprised that she's in so little of this trailer. Like, it seems like the main characters are going to be Chris and Claire, which is an interesting choice. I don't necessarily think it's bad, but I think, again, Leon and Claire are my favorite, and I want them both to get the time they deserve to shine. And even though I don't like Jill, she deserves the chance to shine in this movie, because I think Jill's kind of boring in Resident Evil 1, but I think in Resident Evil 3, she's fucking cool. What sold me on Jill finally as a character was the Resident Evil 3 remake, where they give her like an actual personality and you like her. Because in the first game and the third game originally, she like has no personality. She's like, oh, I'm the Girl Stars member. It's like, okay, well, is there anything else to your character? And they're like, nope. So in Resident Evil 3 remake, they give her like an actual character, and that's when I finally liked Jill. We don't talk about Jill in Resident Evil 5. That's a whole video's worth of discussion about how awful that is. But yeah, and then also Wesker really didn't get much screen time, and I'm worried because it's weird. They're giving screen time to Claire and Chris and then William Birkin. And 2 of those 3 are like main characters of the second game. So it's almost treating like the first game as like a side note, and I don't know how I feel about that. So as you can tell, I'm conflicted. I did see online people were shitting all over this like it's the worst thing ever before I watched it, and I don't think that's the case. I am concerned about story elements, but I think visually it looks fine for what it is. Again, I didn't expect this to be anything amazing, so maybe I had tempered my expectations enough to not be upset. But either way, let me know what you guys thought in the comments below, and yeah, when I see it in a month and a half, I'll let you know how it is, because like with Sonic, it's one of my favorite franchises. And again, the Sonic movie, I think, is a pretty good movie. Like, it's not amazing, but it's pretty decent. I think I gave it an 8 out of 10 only because I was a Sonic fan. I think as a non-fan, I gave it a 6.5 or a 7, which is the same as the Warcraft movie. If it could just be that level, like, I'd be fine. If the Resident Evil movie was just at that level, I'd be okay with it. So I hope that's what it is. But until then, I'll see you guys later. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And yeah, farewell.